So today's webinar will be Plan for a Successful Business and is presented by SCORE Chicago. Hannah?
Thank you so much, Elisa, Geraldine, and the Chicago BACP. I really appreciate your continued partnership and collaboration with SCORE Chicago. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Hannah Fernandez, and I am the chapter chair of SCORE Chicago. SCORE has been a resource partner of the SBA since 1964, and we are the premier source of business mentoring in the country. So whether you are a new entrepreneur or you've been in business for a long time, our SCORE mentors could offer you free and confidential mentoring. To make an appointment, go to our website at chicago.score.org. Right now, in-person sessions are suspended, but mentoring is available via video or phone. Now I'd like to introduce today's workshop presenter. Our speaker is Lebedow, and he has been a workshop presenter for SCORE Chicago for 8 years. He is co-founder and chairman of a global marketing consulting organization. He serves in senior management positions of Fortune 500 companies and assess these companies' market environments in terms of growth, technological threats, opportunities, and competitive positioning. Aaron, thank you so much. You've got the floor.
Thank you, Hannah. If I may thank each of you for joining us this afternoon. We will go into the plan for business success in a moment, but I'd like to emphasize the point that Hannah made a moment ago, and that is please ask any questions that come to mind. There's no measurement on the quality of the question, just if it's a thought you have, share it with us, and I do my best to respond to it. But it adds measurably to the presentation itself, and I look forward to that opportunity. In the context of this presentation, we're going to cover the concept of preparing a business plan. And typically that's done in the mode of someone seeking financial support, or within a company, as they often do, they write their own business plans, and we'd like this presentation to add to the quality of what their specific business plan has been over time. So basically, we look to be able to contribute in both areas to a new startup or to an existing existing organization who has their own plan. Okay. The basic content of today's presentation is outlined on this page and just a line on the following page. I'd like to spend a moment talking a little further about SCORE. Hannah touched on it, and I'd like to embellish it a bit. And then I'll pose some questions that are relevant to a business plan. And that will be an alert to what I hope to cover through these sections that I'm going to be presenting to you today. The executive summary is something that's written obviously at the end of a plan and is probably the most important section you may write. It typically is very short. It used to be considered a one-pager, and I've argued that that's tough, so maybe 2 or 3 pages, but not 4 or 5. So it basically summarizes everything you've done in all of the other sections. And its purpose is typically as an introduction to anybody who is in the business with you, or more likely, if you're seeking funding from a source, it's either a bank or maybe a private equity company. Either one may be the source of funding for you, and the executive summary is the first document that they look at. The rule typically has been if the executive summary doesn't turn them on to proceed with you, they'll thank you for your efforts and suggest you go somewhere else. If it is a turn on to whomever is the lead person that you present it to, they typically will ask someone else in the organization to read the rest of your plan, but you've made it by getting into the organization through the use of your executive summary. So it becomes a very critical document, and again, it's written when all of the other sections are done, and then you summarize all of that in a very brief and hopefully concise format. The other sections are pretty straightforward. The operations plan just defines your business. The marketing plan, a vital one that I accentuate a great deal because of my background in the marketing consulting world, and I'll embellish on that when we get there. And then the financial questions, which become a critical part of what you're going to be doing in forecasting your revenue stream, your cost stream, and obviously your cash flow as well. The pro forma, many people have not, from my past experience, have not encountered pro formas. Basically, that's the future of a business. Accounting wise, you've had accounting statements that cover the history of the business, but the pro forma that you're going to create in your business plan talks about the future forecast of the program that you're embellishing and you're presenting to the parties who are reading it. So basically, that's what your pro forma means, and it's a vital part of the program, as you can imagine. The action plan talks about specific steps of the plan and where you want to go with it, and then ultimately writing the plan becomes critical. And what I like to indicate, and I'll probably repeat it when we get to that section, remember that the plan is a tool either for an existing business to guide it in the future or for a new business to establish where it wants to go. You don't spend the better part of your lifetime writing a plan. It's a tool, and we'll use it in that manner. Then I discuss some mistakes that I've seen made in some of these plans, and I think they're worth talking about and acknowledging it. And this is typically, the addition to the plan is typically the area where the source of your financing, assuming you're seeking financing, is basically going to ask you some very personal questions about who you are, really trying to establish your credibility. I'll touch base on some of those as well.
Aaron, really quickly, a question came in. How does this webinar help home-based business?
How does it do what, please, Elisa?
How does it help home-based businesses?
There was a phrase you're using, and I don't pick it up in the communication. I'm sorry. How does it help doing what again?
How does this webinar help home-based business?
What's that word you use again? I'm not picking it up.
Home. H-O-M-E. Home-based.
Oh, I don't think it matters in what the business is and whether it's home-based or whether it's established organization. This is an outline of what you want to do tomorrow and your forecast of how you're going to do it. And it relates to many ingredients of what you're going to be doing in the future, whether it's home-based or whether it's a normal established business. So it's comparable to that, and therefore I believe to the extent you're able to use it and understand it well, I believe it contributes to a home-based business as well.
Great.
Okay. Okay, as Hannah mentioned, I've been involved with SCORE for some 8 years, and I've taught this workshop, the business planning workshop, during that period of time. And I found that the bulk of the people who attend, and may be true of our audience today, are typically people in a startup mode. They're in an existing business and want to start their own, or they may have left the business and are starting in a new format of their future. But surely people within an existing business who have their own business plan can be part of this kind of program as well. Because I'd like to believe our business plan presentation really will embellish what you're doing now and make it a more effective document as it's used internally in an established company. I'd like to talk a bit about the SCORE background, as Hannah touched on earlier. It's a nationwide organization. There are comparable offices to the Chicago office all over the country, and it's basically staffed by volunteers. The vast majority of the organization is a volunteer group. At one point, Chicago has, in the second line, 40 locations, a headquarter office being downtown Chicago, and we had 135 volunteers. Typically, I found when someone volunteers at SCORE, their goal is to become a mentor. And let me accentuate that role because it's a vital one to the SCORE organization. Mentors are individual volunteers who actually work with an individual startup company or an existing company as well, and work with them in the context of helping them to gain their future position in business. And interesting enough at SCORE, which is true of most of what SCORE does, there's no cost for the mentoring role. The mentor may be part of a relationship with an individual or a company for as long as that individual or company wants the mentor to be there. And the mentor participates with them on most decisions in terms of their future. And we find that a vital part of the SCORE offering and has been an integral part of SCORE since its inception. The workshops are multiple, as I indicate here. Last year, I believe SCORE may have taught as many as 200 of them, and they're comparable to what we're doing today. It typically, though, at SCORE, it's a 2.5 to 3 hour session, and it covers a multitude of subjects in terms of starting a company, being involved in a company, etc. SCORE also has a consulting group, and that is if a company needs help, it's an established company and needs help in what they're doing, whether it be manufacturing or revenue streams for marketing or accounting, SCORE may send in a team of people, one or two at least, and basically there's no cost to this effort either. So SCORE is integral to all phases of companies, whether they're startup or existing, and they've been that matter for many years. The consulting group, though, we typically have a minimum of a revenue stream of $3 million, and it could go as high as 35 million, but we're not really offering the service to large corporations. Let's take a moment and talk about the business plan. It really typically covers your past, your current perspectives, and your future operations. As a result, it summarizes the existing business, there is one, or if it's a future business, it summarizes what the business wants to be. It has historical financial statement to the extent it's established. And then the key part of it is the pro forma, where it forecasts your future. And that's applicable to an existing business or to a startup as well. So pro forma becomes integral to your financial perspectives in the plan. Let's talk for a moment about what is a business plan in terms of the ingredients I've described in page A2. Critical to a business plan is your ability to define a market need. The danger we face is people will start into a business when they and their friends think it's a great idea. And the point you'll see I'll make over and over again in today's presentation is basically you go after what you've defined is a market need, and the only way you determine that, and you'll see that I talk at length about this later, is that you talk to your marketplace to determine if your idea is one that they find receptive. So remember again, a key point of your definition here of what is the market need is not only your creation of an idea, but your ability to go to market and ask the market if they think it's a wonderful thought process and something that will contribute to their future. That, in essence, defining their market need.
And Aaron, how often should you update your business plan, if at all?
My perspective, it's a good question. You do update it because it rarely stays as a fixed document because many things change. The marketplace may change on you, and that's not surprising, and your company may change in some respect as well. So what I found from my client base, they may review the plan every 6 months, surely no less than every year. and they make changes to it. It's not typically a total rewrite. It's an embellishment of what they've already written based on what's happening in the marketplace that they're going to be facing. So view a 6-month or an annual review is probably being the appropriate time frames. In terms of your product or service offering, your goal in the plan is defining the key features of each, the advantages of the plan, and if there are certain limitations that you face, often we find those are because you don't have the funding you need to do what you want, and those limitations are mitigated when you get the funding. So basically you have ingredients that talk about what are these problems that you're facing if they exist, and I assume they do for most people, and what are your thoughts in mitigating these limitations? And then what's the market segment that you're going to go after? It ties into your definition earlier of the business vision and the marketing need, and who are the kinds of customers that you're going to be serving. As a key ingredient of the plan, you've got to size the market segment that you're going to be focused upon. And what we have found, and it's an integral to my consulting firm, you don't create the market size. You really talk to people in the market who can help you define it. And that group normally is the competition. And I'll talk at length when we get to that section about how you try to get information from competition to size the market. Pricing is often twofold. It may be a cost plus a margin play, or it may be done in a manner where you get the market to help you on your pricing forecast. And then the distribution channels, typically in a service you're selling directly to the customer or the client, if I may. In the case of a manufactured product, you may need help in the distribution channel, and you have that through the course of distributors working with you who may very well be your source of marketing, in addition to your own staff marketing to them, and they in turn to your customers. So I have found service often goes direct. Manufacturing typically requires a product going through channels, and those channels require distribution assistance.
Aaron, if you don't mind, can we pause because a lot of questions are coming through for this portion?
Sure.
Okay, first question. You mentioned talking to the market, but shouldn't you be careful about not giving out too much information about what you're doing or what you're thinking of doing?
Yes, well, I believe that's a fair concern, but I really think the marketplace is more critical to get a sense of it. They're going to relate to your idea. Let's assume now it's a product, or it could be, again, a service, and they're going to make recommendations as to what you can do with that idea to further embellish their need and serve their need. And therefore, I don't think you have much choice but to define the product or service you're going after. They don't react to it. They're looking for someone that's going to aid them, and you're the source of aiding them. So it's not likely they're going to take your product and or your service and try to copy it or embellish it a bit and escape into the marketplace before you do. Further, you're ready to move into the market as soon as you finish your market assessment, and they're nowhere near that in the context of it. So if anyone really chooses to become a competitor of yours, you're going to be way into the marketplace before they can gear up, because they can do that once they know what you're in the market with anyway. They can decide to compete against you. People called your competition may very well do that anyway. So we have found that going to get insight from them as to whether our idea serves a need of theirs and how it affects them and how good it might be to contribute to their future is vital to the determinant vitality of your idea.
And Aaron, how would you define embellishment?
Well, it's true. I use embellishment as a word to describe your contribution to their need. They have a product, they have a service, you're adding to it by bringing something new to them, and that aids in improving their product or service. So I use the word embellishment to describe that. The synonym may be improvement of their offering. And that's the purpose of marketing it to them and their willingness to buy it.
And how often should you rebrand or change your marketing strategy?
I believe that relates to how the market's responding to you. Often I find is when competition gets active in your area and decides to build something around your business that competes with your product or your service, that's when you're going to touch base with trying to revise your market, your offering, your product and or your service, as the case may be. Typically, I don't have a time frame that I've experienced, but it relates to the market. Your market may change, the needs of your market may change, and your competitors may push you into that direction. Any of these may happen, or all of these may happen, and that's when I feel you start to massage your product or massage your service.
Okay. And just a couple housekeeping things. This presentation will be emailed. So for those of you asking, you will be able to get a copy of the presentation. Also, for those interested in getting Chicago SCORE mentors to assist you with business plans or just get more information, once again, you could visit chicago.score.org and make a request to meet, or virtually at this point, meet with a Chicago SCORE mentor and get information about business plans as well.
Good.
And let me
Yes,
keep going.
your mentor, if you do participate with SCORE through the use of a mentor, the mentor is a major ingredient of the formulation of your plan. They'll work with you to enhance it, they will work with you to critique it, and they will make sure it's as good as the collective effort on your part and theirs can be. So they're a vital, vital source to your future if you wish to participate with SCORE.
A few more questions coming in. Is there anything different about starting up a company for my friends, and if we are young kids? I think
I'm not sure I really captured that question. If
right.
you try it again on me, if you would, please, Elisa.
I think, and I may be interpreting this question wrong, but I believe maybe this person is a young entrepreneur and wants to start a company for his friends.
Started for his friend?
It says for my friends, so that's what I'm going with.
Okay. Well, whether it's for yourself or you're working to do it for a friend, I believe the effort I'm suggesting to you today is a major requirement. You've got to establish the future of what you're doing, and that the plan is a vehicle to do that and document it in a written format. Again, so many people use the evolution of a plan to gain financial support from third parties, which could be a bank, could be a third-party investor, but they use a plan to accomplish that. And I assure you, neither a bank nor a private equity investor who may help you financially will do so unless they've read your plan in advance and not only believe in your plan, but believe in you. So that's a vital ingredient of your financial support for any effort that you undertake.
And two people asked questions that are somewhat similar. Where do you go for marketing/pricing for a particular industry? And also, how do you perform a market assessment?
The first question I wasn't sure about, but I think they tie together. From our experience, and it was a long time that we were into it, and that was our world, we basically just go to market and talk to it. Let me touch base on something I will embellish on later again in terms of getting information. You've got an idea, it's an existing product, or more likely something new that you feel is relevant to the marketplace. And what I'm suggesting again, you're going to talk to customers who are potential customers of this particular product or service. And you're going to describe what you're doing and get their response to whether they like it or whether they don't like it. And as I suggested earlier, they're going to offer suggestions on how you can embellish it enough to be even more beneficial to their particular need. So you've improved upon their product or you've improved upon their service, and that's why they will pay you for that particular service or that particular product. That's basically what you do. So from our point of view, the marketplace tells you whether you've got a winner or whether you don't. And then basically to get a lot more information, you're going to want to go to talk to people who you might view today, based on what you're offering to the market, as your competition. And we have found that competitors are probably the most important singular interview you can do. And I'll save how do you get the competition and why will they talk to you, which is often the question asked, when we get to that particular section. But it's vital to it. So your interview program in the marketplace takes two steps. In first, talking to customers or potential customers if you're new at the business, and two, with that information, you then go to your competition.
And when you say the market, someone's asking, who is the market? Meaning, who do I talk to see if there's a need for the service I want to offer?
Well, I would think you've got to make that decision once you know what you want to offer and what kind of company would be interested in that kind of service or product. I think it's defined by your perception of what's out there and what are you bringing to them to get them to buy something from you. And the something, again, is either a product or a service from you. So you define who these people might be, and then you can readily characterize who they are by name of company, etc. And in our mind, we call them up in advance and tell them we're coming to their particular area. We did it nationally. We had a major international program. We did it internationally. You'd probably do it initially in the Chicago market, at least for new businesses. Typically, I find they're Chicago-based and Chicago-focused on their market need. And basically, the others are existing businesses. They market not only in the Chicago area, but all over the country in where they're going. So you can define that by knowing what kind of company might be interested in it. And the might is answered when you talk to them. Is it real to them? Or is it merely your good idea and they really don't have any interest in doing it? Because they're going to tell you whether you have a vital idea or whether you don't in terms of your product or your service.
And going back on this slide, you mentioned pricing and distribution channels. Can you expand about the pricing and distribution channels?
Sure. Obviously, if you're starting with something new, you're going to have to determine what price you're going to offer. And one of the basic ways to do it there, you'll see in the section, I'll talk about 2 or 3 different ways to do it. But the straightforward one is to really take your costs, add your overhead to it, and a margin for profitability, and that's your price. And you don't know at this point whether that's vital to the marketplace because it may be overpricing the marketplace and what they're willing to pay. So often we like to go to market and ask the marketplace, we have some price ideas, we'd like you to react to it. Now, the vulnerability you have, people have a tendency to say it's too much, the price is too high. But you've got to make that determination and talking to enough people in the market to see what there is reaction to the pricing you anticipate using. The other alternatives you feel that we're going to talk about could be in pricing based on looking at what's out there now that you're going to compete with. And upon knowing that, see what pricing they may be asking for at this point in time. So your approach is either existing pricing in the marketplace or your cost plus overhead plus margin, that's your pricing base. Either one may be the way you go, or both, as you're trying to establish credibility to the price you want to bring to the market.
Okay, we're going to take a couple more questions relating to the current slide. If it's a consumer product, how do you devise a study/analysis for a compelling sample of consumers? How formal does it have to be? Do you need to hire a firm that specializes in such consumer surveys, or can you do it informally?
Well, I think it's an insightful question because let me portray what you had. Our market, the one that I ran in our firm, was basically industrial or technology based. We bought a consumer company, and let me portray what we found. When they did a study, they did it not in 10s or 20s or 50s. They probably interviewed hundreds or maybe thousands of people. In their case, you've seen these with people with questionnaires when you walked into a mall, or you can do so on the telephone. A firm is typically what I've seen the one most vital in doing a consumer study. An individual evolving a consumer study can do so, but they've got to talk to an awful lot of consumers to assure themselves that they've evolved something that is vital to the consumer marketplace. It's a very vast marketplace and one that has many perspectives to it. And when we get to that section, you'll see what these consumer firms typically look for, a lot of information about the vitality of the consumer and therefore the consumer's reaction to the idea. So it's a challenge to get the vital information on a consumer marketplace. From my experience, tougher to get than doing it for an industrial marketplace because you have many more people to talk to and many different reactions to the particular product that may be offered.
Great. And we'll pause for questions, or we'll unpause for questions right now as we move to the next slide. And just a reminder to everyone, put your questions in the chat box and make sure it goes to all panelists so everyone can view the questions. And also, once again, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available. If not the recording, definitely the slides itself. And if you are seeking any assistance for business planning, please reach out to Square Chicago. They're an absolute great partner of the city, and they have many more resources outside of just business planning that you should definitely look into. And once again, their website is chicago.score.org. Aaron, if you want to proceed.
Yes, I just want to go back a step to that line item when the party asked about pricing and distribution. I touched on pricing, I didn't touch on distribution. Normally when you're looking for help in distribution, again, that's typically with a product. Historically, I have found, as in our business, we sold a service and we sold it directly to the client or the customer, as you wish. So in the case of distribution channels, they normally exist. They're normally companies selling into the marketplace that you want to enter, unless it's a concept that didn't exist before. And they are established in their business, doing what we want to do. They sell to the people you ultimately want to call your customer. So you're going to need help to get to them because there are too many of them for your people to sell one-on-one as you might with a service. So the distribution channels typically exist, and you can readily track them down once you know what you're going to offer to the market. Whoops. Okay, key ingredient, and I will emphasize many times through the course of this presentation, is to assess your competition. Recognize that if you're new to the market and you come into the marketplace, they are not going to welcome you with a welcome to the market party. You are going to face competition for them. They rarely let you enter without responding in some way, and they can do it in many ways from their point of view, depending on the kind of company they are today. Are they a large company with funding, or are they a small company that might want to compete with you by embellishing their product to be comparable to yours or maybe better than yours? You want to understand them as best you can, and these are some of the ingredients that become very critical to knowing your competition. And one of the key ones is their strengths and weaknesses. And frankly, you're not going to make that judgment yourself. We found that your interviews with your potential customers, you'll talk, among the things you're going to ask about them are the people who serve them with products that you might consider to be your future competition. They'll discuss the strengths and weaknesses of the competitor, what they like about them and what they don't like about them, and what they like or don't like about their product or service. So they're going to give you a feel for their strengths and weaknesses. And that will help you with determining the vulnerability they are to your entry into the marketplace. Key data. Assessing your competition is parallel to assessing your customers, and often even more critical, because they're the ones going to fight you in the marketplace when they realize you're entering, and you may be taking something away from them that they've had for many years, and that's called their market share. And they aren't too happy by anybody taking market share away from them. And that's what you're most likely to be doing unless you have a product evolved that has no competitors in the market, which is truly very, very rare. Okay, penetration is the best estimate of what your revenue stream can be for the first 3 or 5 years. And it's integral to establishing your pro forma financial statement, because you need a revenue stream first, and then you got your estimate of costs and your margin, and then you produce your product. So basically penetrating a market and what share of it you think you can get, and that's just an estimate on your feel of what the market has been telling you about the vitality of your product or service. You got a feel for that, and you an estimate. But these estimates are normally in the area of, could be 10%, could be 5%, maybe 15%. You're not going to get 80 or 90% of a marketplace if you have any kind of competition in that marketplace today. So recognize that's key to what you're estimating and what is part of your business plan forecast. Your pro forma has got to be there. Now, one of the things you're going to anticipate, and I found this to be true in virtually every entry a client may have had, and that is that the competitor is going to respond to you. Someone is going to conclude that you're going after their share, and they're not going to sit still. They're either going to try to build around your product and improve upon your product or service. They're not going to let you sit there and take dollars revenue away from them. So if that's true, and assume it is when you're penetrating, be prepared to respond to their penetration response, basically. The competitor's going to respond to what we like to do often when we're in that phase is we sit back and say, if we were your competitor, what would we do to compete against you? And frankly, if you do that yourself and act as if you were the competitor competing with your product or service, you can deduce what that competitor is likely to do to compete with you, and then you can prepare yourself by being more aggressive about your marketing, really modifying your product or service even further, or doing whatever you feel is necessary to compete against that response. Because I assure you, if there is competition of any type in the marketplace, they will respond. Okay, the pro forma involves a number of ingredients. It starts with direct costs, which are really the salary or hourly of your cost of people working in your firm. The fixed costs are normally your overhead costs. The profitability, we like to stop at cash flow, which is before after-tax profit. It's a line item before that in your statement, and it's the profitability of your firm, but it doesn't take time to talk about your tax base and how you're going to mitigate your tax base. We'll leave that to the accountants some future date, but we normally don't recommend you worry about that in your business plan. And again, we're into forecasting a 3 to 5 year period. The private equity people I've found, when they get involved with someone, they normally like to see a 12-month to 18-month forecast monthly, and then they'll work on a 3 to 5 year forecast after that. So you may face any number of challenges to this ingredient, but it's a pro forma for the future. Sorry, I'm not getting this to function now. Hold on as I'm reading.
Aaron, if you don't mind, there's a few more questions coming in.
Well, let me respond to the questions while I'm trying to get the page back.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Obviously, as a startup, we don't have the funds that big businesses have. What are the cost-efficient ways to gain market insights?
The market insight, not market share. So if we're talking about market insight, we're back again to the need to talk to your market. Talk to the customers. And after you've done that and you've got a feel for what the customers tell you about the marketplace and about competition, then you go after your interviews with the competition. And then you're ready with that behind you and that information in front of you now, you're prepared to go to bring your product or a service to market. But without that, you're vulnerable as can be, and you're taking too many risks without having done your assessment of the market.
This is an industry-specific question, but what are some strategies besides referrals for getting clients for accounting/finance services?
If you're offering accounting services, I think your best bet is to talk to them. But basically, is you've got to bring to them why you think you're unique which is true of everything, whether it's product or service, and bring those ideas to them and let them respond to you and indicate whether they think it's vital to them or whether or not. But one of the things I've found, it's a very precarious area to go after accounting. I find it tough. And the reason I suggest that is often I find the relationship between a company and its accounting and legal services are almost, they're part of the family, because there are very few things that neither of these two service offerings don't know about the particular company or the particular proprietor of the company, and often the key people in the company. So it's a very tough sell as you're going after that particular phase. If I were playing with that, I would probably be part of a firm doing it now and learn the ropes with them before I would search to do it on my own. And that's what we did in our evolution of our firm as well.
Great. This is another slightly industry specific, but maybe you can broaden it. This one's asking, how do I find manufacturers for winter coats? So can you talk a little bit about maybe the manufacturing sector in Chicago?
I'm sorry again. How do I find manufacturers who you can use as manufacturers, or manufacturers who would compete?
How do you find manufacturers for winter coats? That is the specific question.
I assume you go to any form of industry organization, and there may be associations in clothing, as I assume there would be, who may very well be there, and they could very well tell you who is the vital part of that industry offering any number of clothing products, one of which could be clothes, could be coats, basically. But that kind of information is readily available online in terms of manufacturers who are there. And one manufacturer, if you talk to people in the industry, may very well tell you about others who they view as competition when you're talking to them, and they very well will evolve the group of people you want to talk to get comparable quotes on the product you want to have manufactured.
What is an appropriate way to accurately estimate market size and penetration? Some market estimations are very based on who is doing the estimation or the base data used. So what would be a good yardstick to go about doing this?
Well, in the area we've talked about, I find the best source of market size is the competitor. And the reason I do is because they're living it now, and they got a feel for the market you want to penetrate, and they have a sense of it. And often we were quite surprised how little they really knew about it, but their gut feel, at least, as to where it may be. And if you talk to a handful of competitors, you're going to start getting a feel for the size of the market from them. And with that kind of information, you've got a range of feel. And with that range of feel, you're going to have to work off of that as the size of market. A point I want to make later again is that when we estimated the future market or estimated the size of an existing market, it's not a number, it's a range. One of the amusing things we often had in our firm was, we had it once, I should say, we had often hired people who have engineering backgrounds as well as advanced degrees in marketing. And we had one gentleman who was an engineer trained, and he forecasted out to 3 to 5 years in the future and did so to a decimal point. Now, in our experience, only an engineer would think to do that, because we've not met a human being that could forecast 3 to 5 years in the future to a decimal point. So basically what we had presented in all of our studies with our clients was a range. The market could be 3 to 5 million, could be 1 to 2 million, could be 20 to 30 million. Bring it as tight as you can, but surely don't hesitate ranging your forecast, because we argue that nobody is capable of being precise within a forecast of a period of time. And if I may, so often people get in trouble when they base their growth in the past on the future of their market. And if I may, that's not the measure of how successful you're going to be tomorrow. If you're an existing company and you've grown at 3 or 4% a year for the last 5 years, that's wonderful. but that doesn't mean you're going to grow at 3 to 4% a year starting tomorrow. And therefore, you've got to establish all the credibility I've suggested earlier. For a startup, you've got to go to market and find out if they think you're wonderful and if you can gain penetration over that period of time and hopefully replicate the 3 to 5 year growth you've had, or even embellish that a bit to a 5 to 10 year growth, as the case may be. So you can't rely on yesterday as being a measure of how well you're going to do tomorrow.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. We'll continue with questions in the upcoming slides. So please put your questions into the Zoom webinar chat and we'll make sure that we answer them. Please continue, Aaron.
Thank you. Here we go again. Bear with me. My control here is a problem for me. I can go backwards readily. Let's see if I can go forwards now. Yeah.
Slowly.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to comment here on the forecast. Normally, we have found when people are relatively new to forecasting, they use what we have termed the hockey stick forecast. And that's embellished with a flat line initially and then a curve that probably goes on a diagonal into the future. And we see that too often. And our experience curve says that's not the way we like to forecast. We like to set a modest growth, whatever you term modest, and then embellish that with an aggressive curve and a slow curve. So your forecast sheet basically has 3 curves to it. Your aggressive, modest, and slow. And you will find aggressive based on what you think is a very aggressive growth curve in the marketplace you want to serve. And slow is one where you might feel you're not going to be able to grow as readily as you initially hoped you might. So that's your forecast mode. And then when you're ready to lock in on your forecast specifically, you pick a curve somewhere within aggressive and slow. It doesn't have to be one of those you've talked about. It could be somewhere between aggressive and modest. It could be somewhere between modest and slow. It's your determination of your growth curve. Okay? And the term I use is realistic, but if anybody's going to read your plan, your forecast has got to be realistic somewhere where you define why I, as a reader, should believe in it. Because the forecast talks about tomorrow's, and all of us fight with the battle as to how good are we about stating what tomorrow will be. If we're in a new mode and we're looking for investment, the 3 ingredients typically are yourself or third parties within your own grasp, a personal loan, which probably comes from the banking ingredient, or a financing mode that could come by someone called a private equity group. And for those of you who aren't familiar with private equity, these are really companies that spend their time financing existing companies and buying them, or financing a startup and being a shareholder of that startup's business and contribute in any manner they can, not only with money, but with guidance in terms of the future of the company that it's starting up. So they're a source of financing that I happen to like if you're able to put your business plan together. And again, they're not going to talk to you till they have the benefit of looking at your business plan. Often they're going to look at the same group as an annual return on investment or a cumulative one over 3 to 5 years, both of which you can establish once you've done your forecast. Now, global opportunities. Typically, we do not talk about the global opportunities which are significant. I had 8 international offices, and my perspective on that is that the global market is much, much bigger than ours in the United States, despite the fact as a country we may have the largest one, but there are a multiplicity of opportunities out there in the international market that you can have access to someday. But when you do that, our experience is that you should write a business plan for every country that you might contemplate entering. And you've got to do your market assessment for that country as you're ready to do it. So you can't just enter because you want to go in there, start selling your product, unless you've done an evaluation of the market, you've talked to competitors, you've talked to customers, and what you'll find, frankly, when you do international is that each country is different because the culture of that country is distinctive. And you're not going to change their culture, but basically you've got to learn to live with their culture and bring something in, and they embellish what they have, but it's not going to be a dramatic change because their culture has evolved after many, many years, and that's something that you've got to learn what it is before you're willing to go that way. So in this particular case, we are not going to talk international at some point when you're ready to do it, and we used to suggest that be successful in one of the toughest markets in the world, our market, and when you're successful here, that's when you should go international. Before that, you want to hold off because our market will teach you a great deal about penetrating and succeeding in any market, because ours is a very demanding market to be part of. So we're going to hold off on talking international. Okay, when you're doing your plan, you're going to have to talk about the people who are going to be in your firm. And one of the things we have when you're doing a startup, you frankly don't know. And what we recommend in the plan is you define a resume for as many people as you're able to identify you may want to hire, but you don't have a name and you don't have any idea who they are. You're merely going to define roles that they're going to play, and you're going to define a resume of what, and I don't mean a 2-page resume, but maybe a paragraph or two on what that individual may be when you hire them. But at the point of your plan, you don't know who they are. So you're going to estimate, because you can't do your plans pro forma till you estimate what you may pay them, how many of these individuals there may be, etc., in your first year, 2, 3, 4 of your existence. And that's all you're probably going to be able to do at this point in time. Okay? So you're defining an individual by description, but not by individual per se, because you don't know who they're going to be. And then one of the things I like to have in any plan is the fact that none of us are perfect in any idea we may have, and either a product or a service may have risks about your future. And if there are risks that you're going to face, there's something you don't have in it that you'd like to have, but you're not ready for it yet, whatever it may be in the product or service, you want to define the risk. But once you do, you want to tell the marketplace what you're going to do to mitigate that risk. So your risk is going to be identified, and your way to take care of that risk is going to be identified. What's real about the reader of your business plan is they're going to look at your forecast in the future and how good you hope to be, and then they're going to look for anything that you may have missed that may be defined as risks of the future of you in the marketplace, because they're investing dollars. And in doing so, they want to mitigate that risk, and by identifying what they are and preparing for that risk, they feel a lot better about it. So the more you can talk about that issue and the more you can say how you're going to mitigate the risk, the better you're going to be in the eyes of the reader, who's going to wonder about what risks you're able to handle and risks you're not. And they focus a lot of attention on your downside, not only being comfortable with your upside. Because in most plans, the upside is well defined. It's the downside that is often not covered in very much detail. That's something they're going to look to, definitely. Okay, I talked about this early on, and this is the essence of the presentation now, and that's the executive summary. Again, I'll reiterate, the most important single document you're going to write within the plan, and it's written when all the other sections have been written, and it's typically a couple, 3, 4 pages at most, and it's used as the document that's going to be read by the bulk of the people who are evaluating your plan, evaluating whether they want to invest in your business. And if they like it, They're going to have the rest of your plan read by someone. Unlikely if it's a senior executive, they'll read it. That's why it's called the executive summary. Or they're going to not like it, and then you're finished with that particular source. Okay? Within your company, it's evolved as an executive summary because it's positioned in that manner for your senior members of your organization. They will read the executive summary. They may want to read the rest of it within a company, depending on how large you are, but basically, they have to be turned on by the executive summary, and that's what you're going to write. Okay, so focus on that as your last part of your written document, and it's critical to your future success. And this I always calls a bit motherhood and fatherhood. Be positive, be enthusiastic, and be succinct. But within the plan, indicate you know enough about your market environment that you're prepared to enter that market. Okay. The operations plan. This is basically a description of your business. What do you want to do with it? And it talks about some of the detail about your product or service, how it differentiates from your marketplace. We talked about that earlier. Your management organization, what's your structure? So you're building a management chart, telling them what your organization will be, and you don't have anybody to fill the chart yet. You merely have these people that whose job you defined earlier. You're basically going to place them in your management organization. And then if you're going to need physical facilities, or you're going to have manufacturing if it's a product done outside by a third party, or even done internationally. That's going to be what you're going to tell us about in the need for facilities, or whether you're going to be able to market third party and get your product produced. That with a service, you're normally on your own there because that's what you're going to be carrying into the marketplace yourself. Okay. One other area that I feel particularly true of your product, if you've got a product to offer, is be conscious of any technology that is evolving into your marketplace. And how you find out about that is when you talk to your future customer base. They often will tell you that there's someone else who had approached them with an idea that has some parallel to what your product is, or if it's real, even better than the content of the product you may offer. Okay? So you've got to be cognizant of any new technology that's evolving. One of the things that we often found, and we were related with it in our business, was that if somebody wrote about a new technology that they may not even have developed about yet, but they're contemplating, the next thing we knew was a series of telephone calls from clients who want us to do a study about that particular technology, were it to evolve, because it has the capacity of eliminating their product or mitigating your product a great deal in the marketplace. So the fear level evolves as a new technology is identified. So recognize it's important to know if there's anything being developed that could compete with you, even if it's not there yet. Okay? Then these are the people, we talked about that a moment ago. Order fulfillment is merely how you're going to handle any orders you receive and the kind of cash flow expectation you have from it. Okay, when we get to your marketing plan, coming out of a marketing consulting career, it's probably as important or anything as what you could be doing in your business plan. It's going to talk about the features and benefits of your product or service, again, what you're going to present to your market. The environmental factors talks about the macro market, the United States market, if that's your market, the Chicago market, if that's your market, and what growth, et cetera, is happening, not in your particular product, but in the whole, if it's the country you're serving, the growth curve, GMP of the country, our country in the future. It's basically a growth curve in a macro sense, not a micro sense around your particular market. Identify your target market. Again, what are the companies or ingredients of your marketplace that you want to offer? Identify your competition. The value proposition talks a definition of what you are. Pricing we've touched on. How you're going to market your product or your services. And then ultimately, when you're done with that, your pro forma revenue forecast, and then your pro forma P&L statement as well. Okay, and then again, you've defined the features of your product, and these are the characteristics that make it work and makes it unique versus your marketplace. And then your customer needs. Remember, you're typically, unless you're evolving something that didn't exist before, where there's no competition, which may happen, but it's very unusual and unique, you're going to fill a need of a customer base. And these are needs that you are going to improve upon because they have them, because everybody has needs to improve upon what their offering is in their market. And you're going to offer something that fits into their particular product mode or service mode that will embellish that particular situation and improve upon it. Ideally, if you could patent it or have intellectual property, that's great. We have not found that to be, applicable to those that we've served through SCORE. And rarely have we found that with our client. The value proposition is really a succinct statement about the unique needs you serve with your client. It's sometimes called a position statement as well. And the elements of it are your target market that you're going to serve, and the demographic and behavioral thing relates often to the consumer market. Product and service benefits and who your customers are, and again, the key strengths and weaknesses of your competition. Okay, when you get to your target market, the kind of ingredients you're going to offer to them are size, growth rate, etc. And when you talk consumer, and I alluded to this earlier, it's a very complex analysis, because for those who have experienced any work with a consulting company or even your own firm, if you're in the consumer area, these are the multiplicity of ingredients you've got to define if you're doing an effective job of assessing a consumer market. So they're looking at every ingredient of the individual person, of you, of me, of anybody who they may want to bring their product to. They want to identify this because it'll aid them in characterizing the product they're offering or the service they're offering, and whether or not the needs of this particular market with these characteristics are relevant. In the industrial segment, we found it simpler in the context of defining your product in a segment you're offered. Because normally it's a product, typically in our work at least, that went to a company's product or service. You've added something to their product or service that improves upon it. And that's why you're going to penetrate the marketplace. So that's what you're going to look for, is a segment of the market where you can find a service or product need that you're serving. You're going to estimate size and revenue, and we're going to talk about geography of it as well. And then ultimately, the tough part is estimating the size of your market segment. Again, when I get to the competition, I'll talk to how we accomplished that. And it was by talking to competitors, and I'll embellish for a moment or talk about why I think you can gain entry to these people. We talk about the economic forecast. That's really, if you're starting a new business, the question is, do you want to start it in a market where the U.S. GNP, gross national product, is not growing? If it's a downward trend, and it's in, as they defined just recently, we're in a recession now in the marketplace in the United States. Is that a vital time to be bringing a new idea into the market? You've got to make that decision. It's tougher than if it's euphoric and growing rapidly, and you're not going to estimate the economic forecast. You're going to look at banks and others who publish these, and you get a multitude of forecasts on the future of the U.S. marketplace over the next year, next 3 years, next 5 years. That's what you want to use in your plan. And just identify who they are and the source that you're using, and that'll tell you where you want to go. The demographic, social, and cultural trends are your consumer market. The next one is government regulations. The Congress may be talking about changes to your marketplace that you want to enter. Not your specific product necessarily, but truly the marketplace you're in, because there's some reason they want to make changes to it, and they'll evolve a set of laws to accomplish that. You want to be conscious of whether that kind of discussion is going on in Washington. And one way to do it is just evaluate and read through the Googles of Washington and what kind of legislation is being evolved. And I assure you, if a reader were to find that you are attuned enough to look at government regulations and evolving ones who could threaten you, and some might even help you, which doesn't happen often, but if it were to threaten you, they are impressed by the fact that you feel it's important enough to recognize that and where it might be in the future. The problem you're facing is nobody, including Congress, doesn't know when it's going to evolve, because it may merely be conversation within the halls of Congress, not yet specific legislation. So you've got to identify where it is in the development and then talk about what may happen if these ideas actually materialize. And that's insightful to anybody writing a plan and impressive to anybody reading the plan. Technology changes, I alluded to earlier. What are the technologies that could in any way affect you? And who are your competitors, and characterizing the competitors in terms of the kind of company, size of company, anything you can estimate from published information that's available, because you have not gone to market yet with it. Now, the competition. Easily the most critical singular interview you may have, because they are the ones who can take share away from you and come at you depending on how large they are and what financial resources they have, where they can either redesign product or fund a marketing program, an advertising program that could make your competition strong and one that you'd have difficulty penetrating. So the reaction to competition is critical. And what I alluded to earlier in terms of getting help from competition is that if you've done the interviews with the customers, you have a strong feel of what they think about the market, not size and growth, but surely the character of the market because of their needs, and they will identify competition for you. And they'll tell you what they think of the competitor and which one has strengths here and which one has strengths there and which has weaknesses that are not being developed to serve the particular customer. So you have a sense of the marketplace from them. And what you then have the ability of doing once your customer interviews are done, your potential customer interviews are done, you then can go to customers with a prospect that's saying, I just finished 20, 50, 75 interviews with your customer base. They've given me a perspective on not only you, but your competitive customers. I'd like to come in and talk to you about it. And normally we have found competition as something to gain from the discussion with you. The one thing you're not going to do is ask them about the information, if they're private, about that are proprietary, such as their financials, but anything about their marketplace and what the marketplace thinks of them as strengths and weaknesses is something that they normally are willing to discuss. What we found as a matter of course, as we got into a conversation with a competitor, the more we knew about the market going in, the more they were willing to discuss. And they often opened up things that they don't have any reason to talk about. But they did because they got caught up in the flow of their business, and we had a knowledge base that they've been into for 15 or 20 years, and we knew what the market was about today. That's something you can gain yourself from the interviews with your potential customers. Okay, so one of the things that I'd like to develop that's a worthwhile chart if you're capable of putting it together, and frankly, I believe you are, by putting competitive features down. I put a list of them which are sort of generic. You could put down features of products. And then as you go to the marketplace and talk to your customer base, get the customers who are A, B, C, D, and E to tell you how they rate the particular feature of an individual product in terms of the various competitors. So some may get a 5 because they think they're wonderful in that phase of product, or they may get a 1 because they think they're missing the boat completely. as you talk to competitors, they would love to see that chart, because you're taking not only their strengths, but the strengths of their competition, and you've identified it in a quantitative sense, which is one way of comparing it in terms of a presentation format at least. So again, the competitive features may be product, may be service, the ingredients of a product, and then you've talked to the marketplace to tell you what they think about each of the competitors in each of those line items, and that's your competitive feature chart. A very effective chart if you take the time to develop it. Okay, pricing. I alluded to earlier. In the pricing format, you have cost plus pricing, which is add your cost together, your overhead, your direct cost, your margin, profit margin that you want, and then you've got a price. Pretty straightforward, one that anybody can do once they know the business they're in and what they expect their cost base will be. Customer-driven pricing is asking competition about what competitors are pricing products at. And you won't get a straight answer from this customer base if you want to ask them what they're paying for it, because they're not willing to identify that, because they may be embarrassed by how much they are paying if you know anything about pricing in the market. So basically, you look to ask them if they have any feel for what the customer pricing base is in the marketplace today, and they might be able to share something. At least they may share a range. And if you've talked to enough customers, you'll get a range that'll start boxing in terms of smaller range, and then a smaller range, and a smaller range. So you got a pricing format that at least give you a feel for what pricing will look like. If you want to talk pricing with your competitors, that's not a very fertile areas to be in, because they're not likely to talk about their pricing at all, but they might want to talk to you about comparative pricing in the marketplace. What we like to do when you're on that is establish pricing and tell the market competition that, well, we understand a product like ours is probably going to talk somewhere in the area of $5 to $6 per unit. And that's a guess. You have no idea what it may be, but you've picked a number that you want a reaction from. And each competitor will respond to tell you you're out of your mind. The product is probably much more $1 to $2 pricing, or it could be $8 to $10 pricing. So you'll get aggressive answers from the competition because you're wrong, or you'll get much more subtle answers, but what you will get are answers. And you've given them a range to react to, and they'll react to it. So if you don't mind being embarrassed by the fact they'll tell you you're not very smart by what you've offered, that's okay. Live with that, because they're going to give you a sense of it. And if you get it again from a number of competitors with that kind of reaction, you've now got a pricing format that you may face in the marketplace. That's really what you're going to do in market size, market growth, and revenue with competition as well. The same format works with them. Okay, when we look at pricing again, if you've got distribution, you got layers of pricing. So it's your pricing to a distributor, their pricing to your customer. That's a range you've got to understand. And you got to establish profit margin for each, because that's what's going to happen. Then you've got price sensitivity, which are really throwing out kind of changes in pricing based on anything that could happen, and that's sales increase or decreasing. Often, if you've got a complementary product and you're bringing it to market, and you've got things that could add to it, you've got a price opportunity to increase pricing. A tough area for price sensitivity. A discount structure. If they bought volume of consequence from you, are you willing to offer reduced pricing? They may ask you that. And then, how would you guesstimate competitors would react to pricing? Again, we like to assume we're the competition, and what would we do if someone came out with pricing that was less than our market price? If they did, what would you do about it? And you formulate your own thought process. The odds are very high, because you're bright and capable of developing the plan and developing the product or service, that you're probably right on to what they're going to do. And then the response to the competition. Okay, marketing your product or service. If you're an existing company, you may have advertising dollars. You may go to coupons. You may, obviously everybody's going to have a website, and this is the personal selling we talked about, or your use of distribution. If you're a startup, you probably don't have a lot of dollars there. You're going to have a website, but you don't have a lot of dollars to do that. So the area we've emphasized here, and the one that we have found most effective, is public relations or networking. And if you don't have dollars to buy it, you basically become your own PR firm. And that means you may write articles on the subject of your idea. You may want to evolve speeches and typically go to the association and see if you can become a speaker about the kind of industry you're serving and what you feel you could develop to make it an opportunity in that marketplace. And you continue to do so with any other source of entry to be in front of the marketplace. And once you become a speaker in any mode, whether it's in this organization of associations or whether you write about it, you have become an expert by definition. So therefore, you come to market being an expert in it because you've learned from that marketplace, and it in turn has credibility for who you are, and therefore the product or service you're offering may gain credibility because you've worked your PR in front of them and even your networking as it may evolve. So for those who are startups, I really like the public relations networking mode. Okay, the email blasts are interesting. I've never found people pay much attention to them in terms of buying a product or service. And then frequent buyer programs are big for the airlines. It could be one you may evolve as well if you think it's relevant to your product offering. And that's getting miles or equivalent in a particular program. Now, the key ingredient here is make sure you put enough dollars into your marketing program. So whatever you have in your pro forma is dollars that are adequate to do what you said you want to do. So often we find people underestimate the marketing dollars they're going to need in their pro forma. Your sales forecast. You've got a number of people you want to talk to, and they're going to guess based on your customer reaction and the competitive positioning, their strengths and weaknesses. You're going to forecast the future of your product or your service. Again, we like to go out 3 to 5 years, and the business, the marketing programs typically for the financial people often requires monthly forecasts for 18 or 24 months. So you face a tough effort to do so, but you're forecasting and you don't have much choice but to put it in place. Again, it's often based on your assessment of what your customer has said, the customer interviews, and what reaction you're getting from competition, and whatever estimates of market size you can estimate they may have based on the competitive interviews. Your customer base is not very good at telling you, other than strengths and weaknesses of competition, anything about the size of competition, the size of your market, because they only know what they are. They rarely know about anybody else. Your competitors are a source of that information. And that's the foundation of your plan. I talked about your modest growth curve initially, and then add one if you really believe you were successful, or a slow growth if somehow you tripped on the way. And what are your assumptions to get there? And then I need, as a reader of your plan, I want to know a detailed set of your assumptions on your sales forecast. A curve is interesting, but it's a tool. What I need is a rationale for your forecast and why you believe it's going to happen and why it's going to happen at that particular level. And that's what I would look for in your plan. Your financial issues. You need money. And if you do, you might come out of your own budget, if you happen to be fortunate to have it, your personal family effort, or if you're in the new business area regarding a financial source such as a bank or a financial entity. Where is your money going to go in your plan? It's part of your capital investment because you've got to buy equipment. It's a portion of it is your working capital. If you need R&D effort because it's a product, part of it going to R&D, and you've got some dollars in there for contingencies that you haven't anticipated yet. But you've told me how you're going to use the money you're asking for from me. If you're an existing business, there are ways we have found you can get money from your inherent business base. One, your accounts receivables may be too old. You're allowing them to wait too long to pay you. You've got to cut that back. You may have overbought inventory, and we've got to look at a reduction of inventory. What kind of cost and expense control do you have in your business base? Is there a way to reduce cost, whether it be product or marketing or any other ingredient of it, staff maybe, because you want to reduce it? Or are there certain assets that are really not being used today that you bought a number of years ago that you can get rid of and generate cash from those? So these are really ingredients that could come from an existing company generating cash if they don't go outside to borrow money or to gain a third-party investor. So other ingredients of gaining money: increase your penetration if you're in the marketplace. Increase your pricing. These are pretty basic 101s, okay? Promotional discounts may move products more quickly. Cost reductions to gain position in the marketplace. Customer service, enhance that because it's not gaining enough reaction from your market yet because you're not doing enough to make that relevant, and therefore it may really be just the training of your employees. And then employee training and outsourcing because you're overspending in that area. So these are just areas where we found clients have overspent typically when they're looking to generate funds, and they're cutting back on expenditures they're presently making for various ingredients of their business. Okay, we've talked a while ago about the aggressive, modest, and slow growth curves in your forecast. And we basically feel that you will choose one curve to be your ultimate forecast, somewhere within aggressive and slow, but it does not have to be one of those three again. It could be anywhere between aggressive and modest or somewhere between modest and slow. You determine it, and then you rationalize why you believe that's what's going to happen. And again, you've got to convince me because I'm a cynic when I read it because you want dollars from me. Okay. There's a cost base that I've seen a number of people in their forecast indicate that they, as the CEO of the company, or maybe even some other senior people, are going to be paid from the profitability of the company. We find that to be an interesting perspective, but one that we feel is not real. We believe built into your pro forma must be compensation for you and compensation for any of your senior executives if for any reason they're not included in your initial pro forma. So please recognize you cannot be a bottom line compensation from the profitability, which you will be able to share in, but you must be compensated in your pro forma initially. Recognize my problem as an investor. If you don't have that in there and something were to happen to you, I'm going to have to hire somebody to replace the CEO of the company. When I do so, I have to do something like pay that CEO. And if I didn't have a line item that was compensation to the past CEO, I'm in big trouble because it might even eat up most of my profitability. So please recognize you will make out in the profitability of your company, but you must build in a compensation that's relevant to the market into your pro forma basis. Okay, we look at a 3 to 5 year growth curve. Ideally, the initial years, 1 and 2, might be monthly. Again, establish a modest revenue growth scenario, and then make sure you add an aggressive one if you believe in it, that you can get there, and one if you don't achieve your modest, what would that curve look like? Ideally, all three should be profitable. Because if you're not, then you got to revise your slow curve to make it profitable. And then if you go aggressive on someone off your modest curve, you've got to have dollars in there to add to your marketing organization and maybe other members of your management team. And if you go slow growth at all, you've got to be focused to remove personnel from your modest curve as well. And then concerns exist from that on the upside or downside of your cash flow and any money you may need if you were borrowing money from a bank. Now, once you've established 3 growth scenarios, you have a business environment in which you can operate, okay? And as an investor, you're going to select one of the curves that you like, that you believe you can attain. Okay, and that curve will evolve, again, either one of the 3 or somewhere between the 3 as you wish. With the resulting cash flow in place, recognize your risks that could affect that growth curve. And again, I emphasize, an investor typically recognizes your upsides, got to believe in that, but they worry about their downside because that's how they lose their money if you don't achieve what you say you could achieve. And downside becomes a major risk to an investor. So you've got to be very cognizant of that issue and recognize what it could be in terms of risks, and then show me again how you're going to mitigate the risks. Okay? And then put a time frame, by the way, obviously, on your cash flow and any loans you may need, and how I, as an investor, are going to be paid back. The action plan is typically one that when we get things done, in doing your plan, there's a must. That's absolute. You got to get it done. There's some important ones that follow your must, and then there's a less important one is delegated to someone else as they're writing your plan. Okay? And then you put a time calendar on that. And this is important because when you get involved into the business and you've got a business plan you've written, you're going to refer to your calendar and see where should you have been at 6 months, and where should you have been at 3, and where should you have been after a year. And you could easily, as we alluded to earlier, massage that plan. You may want to change your plan because it's not materializing the way you hope, or it's even more aggressive in terms of your success than you expected. So now your plan is going to be rewritten, and you've got a calendar. And I've suggested you may not want to look at it daily, but you should look at it often. And then one of the ingredients we say to everybody is write the plan, because you contemplate too much before writing the document, and it's merely a tool. One of the things some people get caught up in, they make the plan their business, and it becomes that vital in what they're doing. And honestly, that's important as a document and as a guide to your future, but it isn't your business. Your business is a product or service evolving. So just get the plan written. Now, one of the things asked of me often is, how long should this plan be? How many pages? My reaction to that is, I guess, I don't know if it's unique or not, but I have a strong perspective on it. And that I found from writing reports to our clients on every final report that we had. Write as long as you wish to write on any subject in your plan. Don't look at the number of pages. Don't count the number of pages. Just write. And what you're really doing is getting all the insight you may have on that subject in written format. Now, as someone who you're going to ask for help from, who will review your plan, that could be your mentor at SCORE, could be a friend who you trust in, basically, they then have the ability to look at your plan as written with as many pages as it has and bring down that plan from the magnitude they have if they think you've overwritten in certain areas. If you've underwritten because you haven't done as I suggested, and some people will look at number of pages and write to the number of pages that they want to have in the plan, which I think is just contrary to good planning at all. You just don't do it that way. Then what they have is less pages than they have in place. And what we had to do often with someone in our firm who wrote the plan, because we had anybody who did the field work, wrote the first draft of the report to our client. We ran into a problem because we had to ask them a whole set of questions and virtually rewrite the document they had because they underwrote. And it's not adequate. But if they overwrote, it was simple to work with them to bring it down from where they were to what might be a more concise document. And working with a mentor or working with anybody who you trust can aid you in writing your plan. They can do that readily with you. But creating it is much tougher to do if you chose to underwrite. And you only underwrite if you tend to count pages. Please don't. Just write and tell me as a reader everything you know about that particular subject. And the more you know about it, the better. And then if you overwrote, that's fine. I have no problem with that. Okay? The business plan is not the business, so don't make it a lifetime project. Write it because it's a tool of yours. And it guides you in the future, which you will embellish and change over time as the marketplace changes and your company changes. But it's a document you want to use as a guide to your tomorrows. But it's a guide. It isn't your business. So make sure you use it in that manner. The templates to the plan. I like to believe that my template is viable, but please recognize, and you probably have already, if you looked at any plans at Google or any comparable area, our friends at SCORE have their own recommendation on templates as well. Go to any template that you feel you're more comfortable with if it's different than the one I've suggested to you here. It's your judgment and what plan looks like, what the format of it may be, what is included and not included in the plan. I've suggested some here. There may be others that you may be more comfortable with. Surely use it. Redundancy is something that those who read your plan will help you with before you present it to anybody. And feedback is the point I mentioned earlier. Make sure you get feedback. And one thing you want to be sure you do, don't take any person's feedback in a negative way because they're trying to help you. So recognize feedback is a plus. It's not a criticism per se. It's an ingredient to improve upon the document you presented them to react to. So take advantage of people you trust. Take advantage of your mentor who surely will be working with you to develop your business plan. And you can gain from them a sense of feedback on what you've written as well. Okay, I like to touch base quickly on mistakes that I've seen. I've had one party come to me in the SCORE world and said he's got 3 businesses that he wants to go into. And he was going to work with us to develop a business plan for each. And what that pointed out is what this first line says, you've got to focus on a business. One, singular, with as much focus as you're able to put down. And that's what you're going to be into, because I want to know as your reader, as your potential investor, I want to know what that business is and how you're going to get it off the ground if you're in a startup. Okay? Not researching your market, as I've alluded to earlier, vital. The real danger one faces is they can believe in the product or service too much. Their friends to tell them how wonderful it is because they rely on their friends for many other decisions they're making. The danger to that is you've not assessed your market. And therefore, you've seen that I've tried to accentuate the vital need to have you do that. Okay? Then you've got understanding the technological threats to the marketplace. What are they? What might happen based on anything you've been able to research? Or anything your marketplace has told you about technology that may be developed. If it were to develop, and it may be a year or 2 or 3 or 4 away, what reaction will you have to it? And what I'd love to know as your reader, as your investor potential, is you've identified those. You've even told me what you do about it if they materialize. And therefore, I'm much more comfortable with my downside if there is one that's going to evolve. Okay? Not assessing your customer needs. That's the interviews with your customers. Again, whether they're personal or on the phone, but don't do the questionnaire. Make sure it's one. And the reason for it, again, is these embellish. These go, you ask one question, and before you know it, you've talked about 3 different subjects with that party that just go anywhere you can go, but they tend to give you a great deal of sense of the needs of the particular customer. And the same thing is true of your competition. You've done all your customer needs, you present the fact that you've done these to someone, and you're happy to discuss the market's reaction to them. Okay, and then you get in the door, and once you're in the door, you can go anywhere you want to go. And there's no reason not to ask the question as long as it doesn't relate to their proprietary information. Because if it does, they'll tell you they got another meeting in about 5 minutes, and they thank you for coming because your meeting's over. So stay away from proprietary questions. And you can get lots of information from them if you do. Okay, and the other area that we find often is people underestimate their cost in their pro forma, or without question, overestimate their revenue stream. They're believers in how good they are, and they go for it. So you've got to look at share of market of all the competition and see what they are today and how much of a share they have and what kind of revenue stream fits into that share mode and where you would be in terms of your share of the market where you to achieve that. Okay, again, this is where people get caught up on how good they think their idea is. It may be wonderful, and I don't want to mitigate how good it is, but please don't go into the business until you've assessed your market and you've got a feel for what the market thinks of your wonderful idea. Okay, not writing a plan, which of course is in a session as we have today of writing a business plan, we assume you're all going to write the plan or work on your existing plan to do even better than it may be today. And then not wanting to listen because we're all strong-willed on the guidance you're getting from your mentor or guidance you may be getting from people you trust. We know entrepreneurs are strong-willed, and they're known to that because they often need that strength to build what they're wanting to build, whether it be new product or service, but they've got to listen, okay? And recognize if you formulate any business, you're going to have a lot of legal stuff and a lot of accounting stuff to worry about. Just pay attention to what's being done for you. And then, as I alluded to earlier, one of the things that an investor worries about is the reality of what you're telling them about you, how successful you've been, etc. Often, someone seeking help will forget to tell them of any failures they may have had, any problems they've had in business in the past. As an investor, I want to know, because most people do have such problems, and I want to know that you're willing to admit to it and identify it, and then tell me what you did to mitigate it. So basically, I will ask you to look at your tax returns, because if you've lost money in the year because of something you didn't do well, it's probably going to show in your tax return. And I'll probably ask you to tell me about your assets and liabilities so I know how vital you are in building any kind of assets and liabilities. But recognize, I don't, as an investor, expect you to have wealth in those assets. You don't have to be. I need to worry about your idea and the vitality of your product or service, not your financial statement per se, or even the liabilities. And then I know I need resumes of people that you know are in existence, such as the senior people in your firm and obviously yourself. So as much background as you can share with me about you and your senior people that you know are going to be in existence, the more comfort I'll gain from where we are. And if I may, that is our plan. If you would, is there any other questions, Lisa, that may be relevant to any aspect of the plan? Please share them with me now.
Absolutely. Let's go through. I'm glad you answered the question about how many pages are appropriate, because we had several people asking that.
It's well, we all think that we have a finite set of pages, but we then cause ourselves lots of trouble when we count pages as we're writing, because we don't write freely. We're just changing sections and rewriting sections, and it's too early to be doing that. When we exhaust ourselves, that's when we can do it.
Does a not-for-profit need a business plan, and does SCORE work with not-for-profits?
Let me react to the first question first. When I started in the business world, I was an employee of a not-for-profit. And what I learned was the not-for-profit has as much motivation as being profitable as a for-profit. They have the same rules, the same needs, the same penetration, the same competitors. They have everything that's going forward. The only thing that's distinctive is the not-for-profit doesn't pay taxes. And the reason they're not paying taxes is the profitability of a not-for-profit doesn't go to the principals of the firm, it goes to the firm. And in fact, the firm buys more equipment, it moves to bigger facilities, it does whatever it can do to enhance the firm itself. But no individual in the firm takes any of its profit. And therefore, it's known as a not-for-profit. I have trouble with when I see people use the word nonprofit because that's not accurate. It is profitable. It can't be, it must be if it wants to exist. It's just what it does with its profit is the real. So it's an important ingredient of not-for-profits. You know, something I would think that Hannah may react as to whether we use not-for-profits, but I don't expect that we'd have any problem at SCORE with mentoring a not-for-profit company as well as a for-profit company. Because again, the bottom line's the same. It's just what do they do with the profitability. Is that reasonable, Hannah?
That's reasonable. Our focus definitely are for-profit businesses, but just like what you said, a nonprofit has as much to gain in creating a business plan as those of a for-profit. And also now in the world of social good, more and more for-profit organizations are also creating a nonprofit arm as well. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, very interesting. Yes, if they have both. It's an evolving thing in today's marketplace. It may not have been around as I grew in the business world. Any other thoughts or questions, Lisa?
Yes. Is it common practice to request a non-disclosure agreement, whether it's from mentors or investors, when intellectual property is discussed?
Very good question. Please recognize that anybody who participates at SCORE in whatever role, whether they're offering workshops or they're offering as a role as mentors, we sign or acknowledge a non-for-profit position. Non-for-profit, non-disclosure position. We sign it. So basically, we've established that already. If you feel more comfortable with the need to have the mentor or anybody else from SCORE sign one, I assume that's acceptable to SCORE. But again, I'd have to let Hannah respond to it because I only had to respond. I have found in the consulting world, our clients typically required such documents to be signed.
Our SCORE mentors do not sign NDAs or non-disclosures. For the point that you made earlier, Aaron, as a SCORE mentor, we go through a heavy vetting and we all have to adhere and sign through a code of ethics that all sessions will be held not only free, but also confidential.
Okay, so SCORE's non-compete signature or the equivalent is adequate from SCORE's point of view. We hope it is from most clients' point of view, and I sense it is because SCORE has been able to operate in that manner.
Okay, great. Someone asked, how do you decide if you should be a sole proprietor, LLC, etc.?
I like to believe I relied when we did that in formulating our company on the perspective from our lawyer who formed the corporation for us and then suggested to us why he felt what it may be. And then our accountant, anybody we might use for accounting work, will aid us whether we should be an S corporation or what type it may be in terms of the format of the profitability of the company and how we would be paid.
So a follow-up question was also, should a business have a lawyer? So I think you just answered that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I would think you've got to have access to both legal and financial help from an accounting. So your cash flow, et cetera, is measurable in a reasonable fashion, and your agreed just formulating the company. People can set up their own company without a lawyer's ingredient today, but I found much greater comfort having to lean on a third party who is a lawyer aiding me in formulating all these ingredients.
Aaron and Elisa, I do want to add that SCORE mentors also do not provide legal help, but we do partner with the Community Law Projects, which also partners with Chicago-based CP. So definitely direct your legal questions to that organization.
Good. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Another question was, is it too late to start a business plan and grow when a business is already established?
Absolutely not too late. From the point I tried to make throughout today's presentation, existing businesses must write business plans. And if they've written one and it's not working, then they rewrite it and do something different in their company to bring the company to a positive posture. And it's merely meaning improve upon it, they write it. Because again, my client base only wrote probably every 6 months or a year. They didn't rewrite it, but they modified it based on changes that have occurred. The changes may occur from the marketplace, or the changes may occur from within. A new product, a new service, a new something, whatever it may be, you're changing the business structure of your company, and therefore you want to revise your business plan.
If you don't mind too, Aaron, I just wanted to step in on that. Yes, the business plan is very important, but also it changes. Every day it changes. Every activity. So someone used the word quantitative and qualitative. You need to use both of those in your research pattern of doing your business plan. When it changes, then you have to change the plan. But what's changing? The context that you're working with, your potential vendors. There's so many things that can happen throughout the day, or where you are developing your business in the real world that you need to document in your business plan as a change. So that's going to be constant in your business plan, to just continually update it, and it will be for the better, because you'll be able to see the changes that you had to do in order to grow the business.
Yeah, Bill was right on there, but again, from my experience, the changes aren't hourly, other than you respond to something that's happening in the marketplace. They're done over a period of time where you've got to let your plan establish itself first. So normally we've seen 6 months and a year as a time when the modifications are made, just normally. That's what they do to their effort. And if necessary, if you want to, you can write it quarterly. But you're going to respond daily to what's happening in the marketplace and the things you've got to make decisions about. That's natural. But the formal plan effort, you normally set some time frames in when you do it.
Thank you. What are the top common mistakes when people are devising a business plan? What is often missed or forgotten?
I feel the area where many people writing plans, many people working in a company, existing company, independent of even the plan, they don't spend enough time evaluating their market. And when they call evaluating their market, that means talking to their market, as I've alluded to many times today, in terms of getting insight from their customer base. And I'm not suggesting here relying only if their salespeople talk to customers and come back from their discussion and often say, we need a new product because so-and-so thinks it would be a great idea. I mean, actually going to market and talking to them about their future, their needs, and how your product or services may serve them or improve upon what they're doing today. That's vital. And therefore, I think that has to be done unequivocally. Just do it.
Do I need to wait until the market gets better before I submit a sell sheet for my product?
Submit a sell sheet?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to press you, Lisa. Define a sell sheet. Are we selling the company?
I am not sure. The person wrote this sell sheet, S-E-L-L sheet.
SCLL?
Yes. Or yes, S-E-L-L sheet.
Yeah, if someone's got a feel for what SCLL is supposed to mean, I appreciate it. But I don't know what it is offhand.
We'll come back to that if the person
Yeah,
is
I think
still
we
on the
got once to
webinar.
figure out what SCLL means.
Aaron? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, Alfonso.
Yeah, you know what? I think a sell sheet, she just might, in sales terms, it just might be a form where, you know, her product offerings are on there and the prices to it. And I wrote in the comments that she shouldn't wait, because that way, you know, her customers or potential new customers know that she is up and running, and that she's in business, as opposed to she might have competitors that are not in business anymore. So it's good for her customers to know that she's in business and she's up and running.
Yeah, that's ideal, but I had pushed very hard for this interview process to go on before you move off with the product or service, because I think you've got to know your marketplace to know the character of what you want to finish in terms of a product or service, so you know where you are. So I would suggest you don't move on it until you've had a chance to determine how the marketplace reacts to your idea.
And a sell sheet essentially is just a page that's going to go ahead and highlight your products and also service benefits in a very succinct and compelling way. So that's what it is.
Okay. If that's a way of portraying how good your product may be or service may be, that's fine. You often see that from every company as to what their product or service may be able to do, and they pass that out pretty aggressively to the marketplace in terms of what they're doing. So we talked about the verbal embellishment of that, because really when you're doing the interview with the customer base, who may someday be your customer literally, you're not there to sell your product. You're there to understand how they react to the idea you have for your product or service. So you got to be careful. Don't let them feel like you're trying to sell something to them, because you're not. You're trying to get them to react to whether or not you're going to serve them well with what your idea may be, or what changes must you make to do it even better.
And Aaron, let me just go ahead and add that the best way to create a sell sheet, you mentioned it several times in this presentation, is really learn from others. Look to see what your competitors are doing. What are their sell sheets? You know, look at how their products are being marketed, and then talk to your potential clients and customers. That's really the best way to create that sell sheet.
I think that's well taken, too, because I think what you do all the time when you're doing your assessment of your strengths and weaknesses of your competition, you're going to get anything they publish that you want to read. And you want to bring them all together and see what they're saying that they can do that you're not sure yet whether you're there or you're beyond that. And you know that at this point in time.
The thing with sell sheets is that you'll see that you and your competitors, your MSRP is going to be pretty much in line with everyone else, and the negotiating is what's not on the MSRP, but at least it gives you an idea of where you are positioned in regards to the price of your offering.
Alfonso, that's vital. That's a vital ingredient of what you need. Right on. Lisa, are you up?
Yes. We'll do a few more questions. Another one is, how do we catch ourselves from overestimating revenue and underestimating costs, especially for a business that is about to launch and doesn't have a framework to accurately judge, as there is no past data?
That's the question that I think is real and happens to everybody who does their forecast. And I don't know of a way to verify what you're doing. When you plan cost, you've got to do the best you can to estimate what each individual is going to cost you and how many of these individuals you're going to need in your startup mode. In terms of revenue, we've got a real challenge, because that's how to forecast it. From my perspective, I'd like to look at the competitive structure of the market and what share of market each has, which means their revenue stream, how significant it is, and then how am I suggesting my revenue stream will be compared to where they are already in the marketplace. because I'm making sure I'm not forecasting one where I'm going to own 95% of the market within the second week of being in the market. I've got to make sure that I pose a reasonable posture to my penetration of the market. And reasonable may be aggressive, that'd be fine, but it's got to be somewhere in reasonableness compared to what the marketplace is today, the size of your market, and the share that your competition has today.
Aaron, I totally agree with you on that. When we're doing pricing, there's just so many levels that you need to be able, or the individual need to identify with. Understand what your product costs you. Understand what it costs to be in your facility. What does your computer cost? Everything that you use within your business, right down to your cost with what you're paying yourself. Put all of those numbers together and then come up with a number for your product. But then you have to look at your competition, and then you also have to look at the market segment that you're going after. So you're looking at those three dynamics in order to come up with the right pricing for your product. You'll know whether you're too high or you're too low when you do go out in the marketplace, but it will also be based on, or it will be primarily based on what you're paying for your services, what your services cost you, and then what the market can bear for your services.
You know, when we know, Bill, what happened, and I alluded to that when I got to that section, is that it's pretty straightforward for you to take your cost, apropos what you just said, add your overhead to it, and put a margin in there. Now you've got a price, but you don't know whether that's competitive to your marketplace. And therefore, you've somehow got to work with the marketplace with cost levels that you're going to get their reaction to. And you may just offer it them, whether you know it or not, and let them react. We find many times that the presenting a number to the market, and it's often to the competitors, and getting their reaction to it, or even to a customer, is put a number out there and then let them react to it, and they'll talk to enough of them and they'll box in that number. So you've got it's $2 to $3 a unit. That's it. And that's where you're going to be. But you may have started at $5 to $10 a unit. And before you know it, you've talked to enough people and they brought it down for you as well. So you need to test the market, but you got to start with knowing what the heck it cost you and what your margin is, etc., before you're able to do that as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron, for your time. This has been absolutely informative. Lots of people are saying thanks so much for the information, and I need to definitely echo their remarks. Thank you so much for being a presenter today over at BACP's webinar series. And once again, for those looking for information for SCORE, the website again is chicago.score.org.